Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Simone here. Today I'm going to be filming my February wrap up, and I read 8 books I believe in the month of February, which I think is pretty good considering it's the shortest month and I've had a lot going on this month. I won't go into it again because most of you already know, but I will link my life update video down below for you so that you can go and check out what's been happening with me. But yeah, so hopefully I'll be back into reading lots and lots next month, but for now I read 8 books and I'm actually pretty happy with that. So the month started off really well, and I actually read my favourite book of the month as my first book, and I will link down below my February favourite so you can go and check that out because I did mention this book there. And that is Still Missing by Chevy Stevens, which is the first Chevy Stevens book I've ever read, and it's also one of my stand up to the TBR books for this month. If I'm completely honest with you, pretty much all of the books I read this month were from my stand up to the TBR, apart from the 2 buddy reads I did, because I was just trying to get them read and because I want to do a new sort of series, new stand up to the TBR starting next month. And yeah, I had 6 left to read and that's pretty much what I read. So I will link my stand up to the TBR down below so you can see me picking them out and talking about them there. But this one was the first one that I got to, and it isn't a massive book. I think it's like 200, well, nearly 300, I think it's just over 300 pages long. And this, like I said, was my favourite. It is a thriller, so it was always starting off in a good place. But this one basically follows our main character, Annie O'Sullivan, who is abducted a year before this book kind of is taking place. And she was abducted and kept captive for a year by a man who basically went to an open house that she was the estate agent at and abducted her at the end of that. And it's about, it's basically told through the interviews that she does with a psychiatrist as she's kind of being, having therapy basically. And it's told between 2 different timelines. So you have the time when she was on the, when she was abducted at the time, and it's her talking to the psychiatrist about that, but it's also about the things that are happening in her real life and how she's not completely kind of more comfortable being back anyway. She's not really sure what's happening, and obviously it's about the kind of like things that have been left with her and the kind of her mental health and things like that. And it's, to me, it was really well done. This is one of those books that is completely like thrilling and will keep you reading. You won't want to put it down. Also, I recently found out this is her debut novel, I believe, which I think is amazing, and I really want to read more because, like I said, this one was great. So I feel like I'm really compelled to pick up the other books that she has written. And yeah, I'm really excited. Also, the funny thing is it's been blurbed on the front here by Karen Slaughter, and it says, "An astonishingly well-crafted debut novel will have you spellbound from the first page until long after you close the book." And I'm actually reading my first Karen Slaughter book this month as well, so really it's becoming a month of thrillers and I absolutely love it. So yeah, this one was a great one. Like I said, I gave it a 5-star. The second book is a book I've definitely mentioned on this channel before, but it was actually a buddy read that I did with Charlie from Charlie Brooke and Lorraine from, I think it's Bookie Laura. I think I mentioned before that she didn't have a YouTube channel, and I was completely wrong. I had just not realised. So yeah, I would definitely check out those guys' channel if you would like to. But we decided to buddy read Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. It was the first time Lorraine had ever read it, but me and Charlie had both read it previously when we were little, but it had been a long time since I'd read it. And this is the vintage classic edition, which I absolutely love. This book follows Meg, Amy, Beth and Jo, who are 4 sisters whose father has gone off to fight in the Civil War, and they are living at home with their mother and a housekeeper, and basically they're falling on kind of hard times. They don't really have the money that they used to have, and it's kind of about that and the friendship with the boy next door as well. And it's just a lovely kind of character driven book. There's not really a plot, like there is a plot, but it's not like, there isn't like a beginning, middle and end, if that makes sense. Like there's lots of little stories throughout it about the family, like although it's written in one story, like if that makes any sense. I loved Jo as my favourite character, but I really just loved all of them, to be honest with you. They each have their own little endearments, and I definitely think that if you read it, you'll sort of see yourself in each of the sisters in different ways, which I think is really fun. I'm really glad I actually buddy read this one because I think that talking to Charlie and Lorraine about it just made me like it even more. I think it's one of those books that could be a little bit twee and a little bit kind of, at the beginning the characters aren't particularly likeable, shall we say. They're a little bit sort of spoiled, and I was starting to be like, I don't remember this being like this, but I think the more I carried on reading it, the more I realised that it's kind of an involvement of their characters, and I think that's the best part of it. So yeah, I definitely love this one. I love buddy reading it, and and I finally gave it a 4-star. The next book I read was a non-fiction book, and it was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot, which I believe was part of my books to read in 2019 TBR, and I'm really glad I read this one. It's quite a big book. I think it's it's nearly 400 pages, but I think that it's one of those books that's quite an intense read, and you do need to kind of take your time with it, especially because there is quite a lot of medical terms in this, and it was a little bit difficult at times to kind of grasp all of the sort of medical terms and medical terminology, but I personally really enjoyed it. Basically, if you don't know who Henrietta Lacks is, Henrietta Lacks was a black tobacco farmer who died of cervical cancer in 1952, and unbeknownst to her and her family, some of her cervical cancer cells were taken by the doctor who operated on her, and since her death have been used to create lots of vaccines and have helped a lot of medical kind of breakthroughs and things, which is amazing. But at the same time, her family was never told about it, she was never told about it, and her family have never her family still live in quite like a poor situation, like they don't have a lot of money, and I think it's one of those things, the whole point of it is meant to be about who owns our cells. Like, do we own our cells, or do other people have the, like, do doctors have the right to take them and then use them for monetary gain? And yeah, I think it's, I just think it's incredible what the human body can do, and I think it's amazing what medical science can do, but I do think that it is about that like line between it. And I thought this was really good because it was telling the story of Henrietta Lacks, because a lot of people in the sort of scientific community know the cells as healer, which is Henrietta Lacks, like her the first part of her name, and they don't know the story behind the woman that sort of has helped so many people and has done so many things. So I think it is important that we talk about her and about, you know, the story of her, and I think this book did that really well. And yeah, I really loved it. I love that it kind of talked about the family from then up to now, kind of where the family are now and things like that. So it was really good, and really glad I read it, and I would definitely urge you to read it, especially if you work in the medical industry or you are interested in science in that way. I work in pharmacy, so it's not something I'd ever come across, but it is something that I'm really interested in, and I'm glad I read it, and I gave it a 4-star. The next book I read was Prison Gate: The Shocking State of Britain's Prisons and the Need for Visionary Change by David Ramsbotham. David Ramsbotham, let me get this right, was the Chief Inspector of Prisons in 1995, and I believe he held that position for I think it was over 5 years, and he essentially was appalled when he went to the first prison that he was inspecting, which was HM Prison Holloway, and he found the conditions there were horrendous. Management there was not there, the help there was not there for the employees, the prisoners were not being treated in the correct way, they were not getting help in terms of education and in terms of rehabilitation, and I think there was just a lot of kind of things that he felt like needed to be addressed. And this book, I won't lie to you, it's not the most kind of like, you will continue reading and you won't want to put it down. Like, I was finding I was reading a chapter and that was kind of doing me for the day. So it did take me quite some time to read, but I'm glad I did read it, because I think it's one of those things that we perhaps don't think about very much in terms of when people are in prison, as people who maybe haven't got any kind of connection to that, we kind of think, oh, they're in prison, like they're not bothering us anymore, it's fine. And maybe that's the attitude that some people have, and I think that we as a society are becoming more and more reliant on it perhaps, and I think more people are going to prison, but I don't know that we're doing enough to help stop people from doing it in the future. Now, I'm not saying that the people in prison need to be deserving of more than the victims, because obviously not, but I think certain things can be done to help both, you know, everybody basically. And I feel like David Ramsbotham was the perfect person to write this book. Obviously he'd been inside that and he'd been in that, and it was really interesting to hear him talk about it. It was also interesting, I think this book was written in 2002, and it was interesting to hear after he'd left what stuff that he'd asked or had put forward as advice had still not been taken into consideration and it had not been done. So I find that really interesting, and obviously this position is highly political as well, so I feel like, let's be honest, the political system in this country is not the most stable right now, so perhaps it explains why the kind of political side of this is not the best, maybe. But I found, like I said, I absolutely found this book interesting, it was fascinating. I did give it a 3-star because it was very wordy, and sometimes I was like, I don't even know what he's talking about anymore. But that is merely just my ignorance on the subject, I think, and I'm glad I read it because I do feel like I'm a bit more clued up on the idea, and I do know a lot more about it now, and I'm more interested, and I would like to read more on this subject in the future. The next book I read on my Kindle, and that is Asking for It, The Alarming Rise of Rape Culture and What We Can Do About It by Kate Harding. This one was another one of my Stand Up to the TBR books, as was The Prison Gate. I didn't mention that before. But this one is another non-fiction book about rape culture, and this talks about, Kate Harding talks from personal experience and also as a researcher into why people rape, how they get away with it, why it keeps happening, or how we can stop it, and the things that we can do to change it in everyday life. It is an American book, so it does follow obviously a lot of American, it does talk about a lot of American specifically, a lot of America specifically, but specifically it does talk about the fact that in every 100 rapes reported in America, only 5 people are ever charged, I think is what the statistic is, which I think is horrendous. It also talks about how the system in America is much more sympathetic towards the rapist than it is to the victim. In most cases of crime, the accused have to defend themselves, but in rape cases, a lot of the time it's the victim that is sort of almost vilified and also kind of judged and, you know, on trial basically. And I feel like it's an interesting debate really, and it's definitely a conversation that I feel like needs to be had. The only thing I did find about this book is that I did find that a lot of it I already knew, and I think that a lot of it was common sense, and a lot of it, I mean, there was some kind of real research in there as well, which is why I did give it a 3-star. But for me, I just couldn't give it any higher because I did feel like a lot of it was kind of things I already knew. But I feel like if you're completely new to that area and that subject, then perhaps this is one that would teach you a lot, because I don't think that everybody knows what's in this book. I think it's just because I have read a lot of other sort of books like this before. The next book I read was my first buddy read with Nicole from A Beautiful Chaos of Books, and my second buddy read of the month, and we read In the Woods by Tana French, which is the first book in the Dublin Murder Squad series, and I really loved this book. I think I gave it a 4-star in the end. It was really interesting to do a buddy read of a thriller. I've never done a buddy read of a thriller before, I don't think. I'm doing one this month as well, which is going really well so far. But I think that this book to me was really interesting. I do think it's very slow paced. Personally, I really enjoyed that, but I know that Nicole wasn't as big a fan of that part of it. I think we both enjoyed the book in general though, but this, you'll obviously have to go and check out Nicole's wrap-up to find out what she thought of it, but this basically follows a detective named Rob Ryan who 20 years before 2 of his best friends went missing, and he was found in the woods and he had no memory of what happened, and then 20 years later he has sort of changed his name. He used to be known as Adam Ryan, but now he goes by Rob, and he basically has become a detective, and it's him trying to figure out what happened when a young girl's body is found in the woods, in the same woods where he was found, and it's whether there's a connection and things like that. I will say the ending was not what I was expecting it to be. I thought there would be more answers, but there wasn't as many. I feel like I still have questions. Now, whether they will be answered in the other books, but as far as I know, the other Dublin Murder Squad series books are about other detectives in the squad, and I don't know if there'll be a crossover potentially, but obviously we'll see. Hopefully I'll read another book in the series at some point and let you know. But I really did enjoy this. The case that was happening, I think this was a good thriller for me because I really enjoyed the characterization of the people in it. I love the relationship between Cassie and Rob, who are the 2 main detectives in this. I really loved Sam, who was one of the side characters, and generally I just really enjoyed the thriller. I thought I did see what was coming towards the end, or when it happened I was like, okay, I can believe that, like I kind of understood it. So I wouldn't say it was completely shocking and out of nowhere, but I did really enjoy this, and I would definitely give another Tana French book a go in the future. The next book I read was another good one, and that was Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden, which this one is the Vintage Classics edition. This follows a young girl in Japan who is sold as a servant and apprentice to a well-known geisha house, and she then has to kind of work her way up the ranks and try to train herself or be trained as a geisha, and it talks about that. I really enjoyed finding out about a geisha. Now, to be honest with you, a lot of the time time I think you hear the word geisha and there are a lot of negative connotations to it. A lot of people think that it's like a prostitute, or that's kind of the same line, but this tells you just how different that is. Now, there are certain elements of sex in this, but I wouldn't say that that's the main like point of a geisha at all. I definitely think if you would like to know more about the culture and you're more interested, definitely give this book a go, because I really enjoyed it. I can't say how completely accurate it is because I don't have any experience with that culture, and I don't know how much Arthur Golden has done his research. I assume he has. I believe he has a what does it say? He does have a degree in art history, and he's lived and worked in Japan, I believe, for most of his life. So I would assume that he's done some research into this, but whether or not that's kind of, because it's not own voices at all. I would be really interested if you know anybody who's Japanese, or you are Japanese and would like to sort of let me know what you think about it, because I'd love to know kind of an own voices opinion on this. But for now, like I said, as much as I know, I can say that I enjoyed the depiction of the geisha in this. I have seen the film a long time ago and I'd like to rewatch that at some point because it's been a long time. But I loved this book, I really did. I gave it a 4-star. It did kind of drag on a bit. It's quite a long book. It's nearly 500 pages, so it did drag on a bit, and I think it didn't probably need to be quite as long as it was. But personally, I just really enjoyed it and found it to be quite a fun read. And then the final book of the month that I read was Domain of the Dead by Ian McKinnon, and this was another one of my Stand Up to the TBR books. I have one left which I'm currently reading, so that will be in my March wrap up, I'm sure. But I really enjoyed this. It's a zombie novel, and it's more of a classic zombie novel than a lot of the ones I've read. This basically follows a group of people who basically, at the start of the zombie apocalypse, I guess, like holed up in a supermarket and basically stopped any zombies getting in, and have basically been living there for the last 3 years. And then one day they're sort of getting low on food, and one of the women basically goes out onto the roof and she spots a helicopter that has landed a little way away, and they try to get to the helicopter, which turns out to be a military helicopter. And it's about that, it's about the research that they're doing to try to find out what happened. It's really, really good. I think it's probably one of the better zombie novels I've read recently. I've read a few duds actually at the end of the last year, but I actually really enjoyed this one. I believe I gave it a 3-star. It wasn't perfect, and there was a lot of kind of like chop and changing between characters, which annoyed me a little bit, but actually I really did enjoy this book, and I'm glad that I read it. Definitely one to check out if you haven't already. So there you have it, guys. That is my February wrap up. Like I said, I read 8 books this month, which I'm actually quite proud of because, like I said, it's been a bit of a one, this one. I would like to know what you read in the month of February. Let me know in the comments down below what your favourite book of the month was, what your least favourite book was, if you've read any of these books and what you think of them. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I shall see you next time for another video. Bye, guys!